central Italy, and that got hit by that 4.2. We're watching for movement to strike up in North Italy next, following along the plate boundary as we told you last night's video. So the two spots would be hit. One has already been hit, USGS just not showing you. Let me show that to you one more time before I sign off here. Here's the German Geophone Agency. See that? 4.2. Let's open up our stats. Here it is, Central Italy, 10/16, 2016, 9:32 UTC, magnitude 4.2. Confirmed, 10 kilometers deep. Look where it struck, guys. Look where it struck. And if we go over to the USGS, they're showing us all these other earthquakes, right? Even, I mean, this is pretty interesting. Let's go back over to the USGS. There we go. And let's pull information on, let's say, the 5. Now take a look at the screen. Okay, look where the swarm is happening in Greece. All right, now make note of where the 4.2 struck. Here, right along this red line, you see this red line? This is the plate boundary. And it goes up into Torino, between Torino and Milan. Well, the next round of movement is going to strike to the north, right up along the fault zone, going up into Italy. And look how it bends to the west. It kind of bends to the west-southwest and goes down into Spain. So we see after Torino and Milan, we see North Spain, South France. We also see activity spread up to the west-northwest towards the English Channel. Germany was struck at the volcanic field at the West Eifel volcanic field just a couple days ago with a 2.9. Well, that movement is going to spread out again. I'm shocked that the USGS is not showing us the 4.2 in Italy. It really kind of is a scientific egg on face at this point if you're going to omit mid-range 4s in areas where 300 people just died last month from an earthquake. Like, you'd think they would be on top of reporting that. When the Italians, the INGV, have it listed as 4.1, when the Germans have it listed as a 4.2, and the USGS has a feed that says 4.0 and greater global activity, and we're data sharing already, and these are respected agencies that are reporting it, the fact that they don't have it means they're trying to hide it. Why would they be trying to hide an earthquake in central Italy? Well, guys, the biggest professionals at the USGS have been on my pages over the past few months, giving us a hard time over earthquake forecasting. And the same people who are responsible for reporting these earthquakes to us are the ones who are denying earthquake forecasting. So when an earthquake strikes in a forecast area and they're actively trolling that post, like they're watching the video, commenting on it, disparaging it, and then an earthquake hits and they don't report it, that to me reeks of some kind of scientific collusion of some kind. It wouldn't even take a child to see that connection. And we know it happens. We know corruption exists when people are trying to protect their interest or their professional financing or whatever they're going to try and protect. But you guys saw it. You see it now on the screen. They're not reporting it. Why? It's like the Nepal earthquake that struck yesterday, the 4.1 that struck in Nepal. Why didn't they report that? Do you know how many times this has happened where they're throwing off the earthquake statistics because they're not reporting earthquakes that they're tasked to report? They're getting money, and they're a government agency. They are tasked with reporting these things. They're supposed to report it. It's not up for debate or question whether or not they should. They're supposed to be, maybe even by law. Maybe there's some laws that say they're supposed to report to us these things. If maybe they need to change their feed to say optional 4.0 earthquakes and greater around the world, and then have a big thing up top that says we only report certain earthquakes. You can't rely on us for actual numbers. Don't rely on us for good information. Don't rely on us for next year's numbers, and certainly don't come back next year in 2017 and quote our numbers. I mean, how could you possibly use the USGS next year in 2017? How could you use the USGS to give you a tally of earthquakes? You want to know how many 4s struck? How many 5s struck? Well, that might be okay if they were reporting them. But I can already show you probably at least a case of maybe 50 or 100 missing 4s, dozens of missing 5s, if not more, and even missing 6s, guys. Missing 6s. Deleted, obfuscated, hidden. It throws off the total tally for the whole planet And next year, if somebody quotes me numbers, says, oh, there were 447 4.0s that struck last year, they'll pull out some number, and I'll say, no, there wasn't. You need to add about 500 or 800 to them. And they'll be like, what? That totally is doubling the amount. And I'll say, yeah, I know. For every one they reported, they missed one. And there's no excuse because the other agencies are catching them and reporting them and keeping track of them. And we're using their agencies like the Europeans, which is down right now, and that's a real shame. Because a huge swarm is happening in Europe, and the USGS is missing an Italy earthquake on that already. I mean, that's unreliable. We've got assets there. We've got relatives there. I mean, people know people in Italy. U.S. has investments there, like that we, the taxpayers, have paid for. We've actually helped them. We're trying to rebuild their spots. They've done huge fundraisers for their towns that were destroyed in the recent earthquakes. And now they're not going to report because of some professional credibility they're trying to maintain where they said earthquakes couldn't be forecast? I mean, I can't see any other reason why they would omit earthquakes that keep striking in the spots where we name. How many times has this happened, guys? What, 10 or 15 times? I'll have to go back and count, but I know it's over 10 in the last year and a half. Where we report, we make a warning for an area of a 4.0 or greater earthquake to strike. The earthquake strikes, and then the USGS, they send their biggest guy over to give me a hard time on my Facebook page and everything else using his main pages, their main pages. It was multiple professors that came over each time. And then they deny that the earthquake hit and don't report it. But then we have other agencies around the world reporting it. I mean, that's too big of a coincidence to keep happening over and over again. And they did it even on the west coast of the U.S., guys. It wasn't just like, oh, it's some international earthquake that they missed. I'm talking about, like, 4s off the coast of Oregon that they just didn't report. Meanwhile, the Europeans, the Japanese, everybody else detecting 4s off the coast of Oregon. We forecast 4s off the coast of Oregon. I've got the lead director of the area smashing me on his page and on my page at the same time the 4s hit, and then they didn't report them. They just ignored them. They had some convenient excuse. They said, oh, we aren't capable of detecting earthquakes out off the shore. That's what they said. That's why they missed it, they said. That they don't have the capability, and that another agency is technically responsible for reporting there. So even though if they could detect it, which they can't according to them, they can't detect earthquakes 4.0 or greater off the coast. And then they said that they happen every day, 4s off the coast here. So much so that it's like shooting fish in a barrel, how many strike out here. And I said, what? They're never reported. They're not reporting 4s. So much so, like the professor said, fish in a barrel out here off the coast. Well, where are they? And then how about the 5s down here in Southern California, in the Gulf of California? We forecast for 5s to strike in the Gulf of California. I said, watch out for 1 to 2 5.0 or greater earthquakes, and then 2 5s struck. Gulf of California, USGS didn't report them. Isn't that wild? So that's just examples on the west coast of the U.S. that they have not reported. Interior of the U.S., on the east coast, when that 4.3 struck in Virginia, like 4 months ago, at the fracking operation there, USGS deleted the earthquake. Then we pressured them and said, you know, what the hell are you deleting an earthquake? They came back and had to have a cover story for it. So it was at a fracking operation, oil pumping operation, but they moved the earthquake by about 10 miles, and then they said it was a mine collapse. And they flipped the magnitude from 4.3 to 3.4. Moved the location by 10 miles, tried to blame it on a mine collapse. You go zoom in on the area, it's a pumping operation, not a mine. Oil wells, gas wells, no mine down below. They're not going to be fracking into a mine, by the way, guys. So that's with a 4 on the East Coast. Or the 4 that struck down here off the East Coast of Florida right after that. 3.8 strikes here off the coast, 2 of them. And they tried to blame them on experimental explosions. I mean, that's what's going on here, guys. So, oh, by the way, when the 4.0 struck off the coast, East Coast, we had forecast for a 4 to strike on the East Coast. We issued a forecast 2 days before saying watch for a 4.0 on the East Coast. Even a guy came over to my page and said, earthquakes don't strike on the East Coast. You remember this, guys? And he said he would give me a bunch of money if an earthquake did strike. Then the 4 hit at the fracking operation, and the USGS immediately deleted the earthquake and tried to say it was a mine collapse. The guy came back and said, USGS says it was a mine collapse. I'm not going to pay you. That's what he said. He said he was going to give me a huge sum of money if an earthquake hit. Then a 4 hit, and they quickly deleted the earthquake. That's collusion, in my opinion. It happened again with the second 3.8 off the east coast of Florida, where they tried to say it was an explosion twice. We forecast for a near 4.0 to strike the east-southeast. We warned the Carolinas, and it struck right here down off the coast of the Carolinas, east of Florida. And they tried to say it was an experimental explosion again. Right? So they're watching my videos, and then they come back and try and deny it and come up with creative excuses. And in this case, just don't report it. Just, they don't need to know. Dutch since confirmed, oh no, he'll use that. We better not report it. That's what's going on. And I wouldn't think that if they weren't sending their biggest names over to harass me on my public pages. I mean, it would just be a coincidence if they, were not doing that. But because they've actually come over and disparaged my forecasts, we know they're watching them. And then they don't report the earthquakes that strike in the areas where we warn? Well, that means they're butthurt. And they're actively doing what we would call, I think, scientific no-no. A fraud, what do you want to call it? A scientific scandal of obfuscating and hiding or misrepresenting data so that they can, save face? I don't know. But you should be upset. You should be upset. There's no 4.2 listed by the USGS. And if you're a scientist, you would want to know when that's going to be there. I mean, you want to know what's going on. And certainly our agencies are capable of reporting 4.0s and greater around the planet. The fact that they're not means that there's something strange going on in the world of science right now that needs to be exposed. And I think I'm doing a pretty good job of that right now. Have a good afternoon, morning.